Hey ladies, thanks for tuning in. We've got a great Q&A for you today. We've got questions that were sent in from our listeners, and we've got things on thyroid, reverse T3, bioidentical hormones, cream versus pills versus whatever else. We've got questions around cycles, perimenopause, menopause, iodine, mold. So stay tuned. And if you've got questions after listening to this today, or you think, yeah, I have a question I need answered in the next Q&A, you can hit me up on Instagram Messenger. I've also got a little jot form that you can fill out. I'll put the link in the show notes, and you can fill out the form for the next Q&A with your questions. So before we get started, I have a really great giveaway. So I have been mulling over in my head for probably now a good 6 months on how to really explode my podcast, because it is pretty quickly growing. We've got over probably, I'd say about 20, anywhere between 20 and 30,000 downloads a month. Excellent, not complaining at all. I think that I'm so grateful for it. But I, of course, want to reach more women. So I looked at Facebook ads, I looked at Instagram ads, and for any of you that are in your own business, you all know that it is a very saturated market when it comes to putting your ads into Facebook or Instagram. So Instagram and Facebook over the years have just had more and more and more people, of course, buying ad space, which means that if you go and put your ad in there, it doesn't really get as much attention as it used to, and you're paying more for it. They've also changed the algorithms. So it's very, very challenging for businesses to actually grow their business page on Facebook or Instagram, because Facebook wants you to buy ads for Facebook or Instagram. So they've made it very challenging. I've talked to some other people, friends of mine that I've interviewed for my podcast, or just colleagues that have said, their Instagram was constantly growing. Their groups were constantly growing. They had a ton of people, lots of likes and follows. And then about 2 years ago, it came to a screeching halt, and their numbers have barely moved since because of these new algorithms. So I thought, how can I give you listeners something in exchange for helping me grow this podcast and really just get the word out there to more women? So I am doing a massive giveaway where I have decided to give away my Burn Fat Fast program. It's one of the most sought after programs in my membership group. Everybody really likes it because it's based on science on how to get quick results without trashing the metabolism. So it's a protein sparing diet. I don't know if you've heard of that. You can Google it. I've put this all together in a really beautiful little ebook. The value is $150, and it comes with a meal plan and instructions, and it's great. It really does work to bump up the weight loss and, speed things up a little bit. Works really, really well if you haven't been chronically low carb dieting, fasting for months, years on end. It definitely works better if you're coming out of maybe a reverse dieting protocol, or you've just been in maintenance mode for a while. And I say that because your body always adjusts to what you're doing. So if you have been super low carb and you've been fasting or one meal a day for the last year, 2 years, 6 months, your body adjusts to that. So it takes a lot to shock it and to get the weight to start coming off again. And you all know this, you've hit those horrible plateaus, and it's because you're doing the same thing all the time. You have to do some reverse dieting, you have to do maintenance calories. so that when you do put the efforts into losing weight, that it shocks the system and the body will let go of some fat. So it is for you, for those that are not coming from that chronic low carb fasting world. If that is you, if you've been doing that for a long time, by all means, you can still enter into to get a copy of this. But I would recommend reverse dieting for a while first, and then utilizing the Burn Fat Fast program. Okay. Also, you're also going to get a coupon to get your first 30 days in the On Track program for free. So the total value of all of this is $225. So I hope that that's enough to make it worth your time, which is literally about, I'd say it's going to take you 3 minutes, 5 minutes tops to do this. I ask that you do each one of the entries. So when you go, you click on the link to the entry form, it's going to say, add your email address in to enter to win. But then there's going to be 5 bonus entries, which are worth 1 point each, 1 entry each. So in total, you're going to have done 6 entries. And I see how many entries you do. So the system tracks that. So once I see that you have 6 entries, so each entry is a different thing. One is, subscribe to my YouTube channel. One is write me a review on iTunes. One of them is like me on Facebook. One of them is follow me on Instagram. Just all the typical stuff, social media stuff that helps business owners grow their business. So once I see you've reached every entry form, then I will send you a copy of the Burn Fat Fast program and your coupon code to get your first month free in the On Track program. So this is awesome. It's great timing for the summer. We're going to run this for a couple of weeks and see how it goes. So there is no limit to how many people can get this. So every one of you listeners can get a copy of this if you go through and do all of these little tasks that I've appointed in order for you to get a free copy. All right, so hit it up. It's all of this information is going to be in the show notes. If you're watching this on Instagram, then you can go to my bio and click on the link, the LinkedIn tree, and the link to enter this contest is going to be in there. Anywhere else, you'll find it in the show notes, or if you're on Facebook, you'll find it in the description. All right. So let's get to today's Q&A. You're listening to The Other Side of Weight Loss. I'm your host, Karen Martell, certified hormone specialist and nutrition coach. If you are ready to go beyond diet and exercise, then tune in each week to hear from leading experts in weight loss, psychology, nutrition, and hormone health as we explore the many avenues of what it really takes to lose weight and feel your best. So my first question comes from my good friend, Helen, all the way over from Australia. That's my really bad Australian accent. Oh my gosh, that's so bad. I'm like the worst person when it comes to accents. So we will not butcher that any further. So yes, Helen sent me a great question. She is the owner of Primal Alternative, and you've heard her on this podcast a few times. I always love having Helen on the show. So Helen, if you're listening, you're going to have to come back on soon. All right. Is there any point having my blood test done when every cycle is different to the last, symptom-wise and sometimes length-wise? So such a great question, Helen, because as we age and our period starts to get irregular, then, and you've done some testing already, and I know that you have. So, if you're somebody listening to this and this is you and you're like, should I be testing when I don't even know where I am in my cycle, or if I'm missing my cycle? So I always say, do a test. Like you always have to start with testing, because for some people, like I just had somebody the other day who said, oh, I'm missing my periods. And, I just went, I seem to skip every other month. Does this mean I'm going into menopause? So I'm like, oh yeah, for sure. And then I was like, but how old are you? Well, she's 40 years old. So it might not be perimenopause. It could be something like polycystic ovarian syndrome. It could be from stress. There could be other factors, especially if you're in your younger years, in your 30s, 20s, things like that. So always test, see that, okay, yes, you're going into perimenopause. Maybe your follicular stimulating hormones climbing up, your estrogen and progesterone are going down. Then at that point, from that point forward, that your ovaries are just starting to shut down, right? So no more estrogen, no more progesterone. For some women, no more testosterone. So at that point, you can start replacing those hormones. And at that point, you can really go by symptoms, at least for a while. So each one of us is going to need something different as far as hormones go, like hormone replacement therapy, supplements, things like that. So you can start taking different hormones with the help of your doctor or hormone coach. And from there, you can then, go, okay, I need to add a little bit more. I need to add a little bit less, because the ranges are so wide when you go to get them tested at a lab. So estrogen will be from 50 to 400, like really wide. And each woman is going to need her estrogen, progesterone, testosterone in different ranges. There are ranges that, we can narrow down a little bit. I definitely find that women, as they're going through into menopause, they tend to do best with their estrogen and progesterone when it's above 100. So some people will go up to, like, I just had a woman there, she was at 400 with her estradiol, but that is where she felt amazing. So it's really then, how do you feel? And it's better to go on how you feel and your symptoms rather than labs at that point. Now, it's not to say that down the road you don't want to test again, because you will. But for example, with myself, I tested, my estrogen actually looked really good, but I was getting hot flashes, night sweats, the weight gain in the belly. All of these things were happening. So I had all these symptoms, and my period started to come late. So then I was like, okay, my estrogen I'd been on progesterone already because I knew that was low, and that helped regulate my cycle. But then I had all these new symptoms show up, had my FSH tested. It was at 23. Anything over 10, we know then you're heading into definitely in perimenopause, headed to menopause. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start replacing my estrogen now. So I started at a small dose, just topping up my own production of it. All my symptoms went away and my cycle regulated. So I haven't tested since. And that was last year that I did that. And everything's great right now. Will I test again? Yeah, I'm going to, but I'm probably not until there's another shift in the hormones, or I want to increase. So if I'm wanting to do an increase of that estrogen, I will probably go and get some testing done first, see where my levels are at, more so out of just curiosity, and go from there. So if you are in this boat where your periods are starting to get irregular, and you're like, do I need to keep testing? I know what's happening here. I'm missing my estrogen. I'm missing my progesterone. Then you know what? Go by symptoms and how you feel. And that's how you're going to know if you've got a good amount of those hormones. And you do have to remember too, and this is why I think you do eventually test again, is a little bit of estrogen can get rid of all of the really nasty little symptoms, like the hot flashes and, the night sweats and the insomnia and the sex drive stuff. Like a little bit goes a long way in those symptoms. But if you don't have enough, estrogen, you're not going to get a lot of the really important benefits out of it, like protection of heart disease, protection in your brain for, warding off Alzheimer's and dementia. You need proper amounts to help with those things. So little bits can help with these minor little things, but if you're coming in and you're testing and you've been on replacement and you're coming in under 50 still with your estrogen, then okay, I probably am not getting all the benefits that I could be getting from my hormone replacement. And then you can talk to your doctor about that. So I know that that's not a super straightforward answer, Helen. Are they ever straightforward with me? No, but it's really, I'm saying, no, you don't have to keep testing. Go by symptoms and start replacing until you feel that those symptoms are all gone. And then in 6 months or so, you can retest again and see, okay, where are we at with my FSH, with my estradiol, my progesterone, and my testosterone, and see if you might need to make some tweaks. All right. Okay. We've got one from Lesa Miller. I have been keto, carnivore, and fasting with extended fast periodically for a year and a half with no weight loss. I am postmenopausal and started HRT 6 months ago. I feel all of the thyroid symptoms, but can't get anyone to listen. Thyroid labs look good, except T3 is below optimal and reverse T3 is 30. I can't get into the endocrinologist for 6 months and fear he won't listen either. I feel in my heart pure T3 would get me on the way to healing and finally get my insulin down to be able to lose the 40 pounds that I gained in 4 months. I also have a high ferritin that I read can keep insulin high. Okay, so quite a bit to unpack there, Lesa, but I just love this question because you said your thyroid labs look good, except your T3 is below optimal and your reverse T3 is sky high. That your thyroid labs look terrible. I don't even need to see your TSH. I don't need to see your T4. If you're saying that your T3 is below what it should be and your RT3 is at 30, I know then that you are very hypothyroid, and you know it as well by the sounds of it. So know that the endocrinologist, unless you've got some sort of, diamond in the rough endocrinologist, most of them I find don't understand reverse T3. And they'll say, oh, yeah, you're fine. It's not a big deal. Or they'll say, oh, well, your T3 is in range. It might be low, but it's in range. Your T4 is fine. Your TSH is fine. So good luck, first of all. Hopefully you do have the diamond in the rough. If not, I really, really encourage you to find a practitioner that really understands thyroid. Because with a reverse T3 of 30, that tells us that your body is converting T4 into reverse T3. And it'll keep your metabolism very slow. And it doesn't matter how much you fast, or actually fasting will make it go higher, just so you know. So I would definitely not be doing keto, carnivore, or fasting right now. Those are the 3 worst diets for that. It could have been the thing that drove your RT3 up. I just was listening to Peter Attia on his podcast talking about when he does extended fasts. I think he fasts for like a week out of every month or something. And when he does his labs, he said that his reverse T3 skyrockets. So he comes out of it, he starts to eat a normal amount of food, and he doesn't follow keto anymore because he found it too challenging on his system. So when he goes back to a normal diet, it corrects itself because he hasn't been in that state for a long time. And this is what happens. And you can fight with me all day long with this, and all the ketoers can fight with me on this about whether or not keto and carnivore will drive your T3 into the ground. Well, it does. I have tested my own free T3, and after doing keto for 1 month, and my numbers dropped. My free T3 number dropped in 1 month. I see it constantly in my practice. I just had a young woman the other day who has been keto carnivore for 2 years. And she said suddenly she started to get really cold and wasn't feeling good and really tired. Looked at her lab. She had her thyroid tested through me. And lo and behold, her free T3 was in the toilet. T4, TSH were fine. So I didn't test reverse T3 on her because she was Canadian. It's quite challenging to get it in Canada. But my guess is her reverse T3 would have been elevated. And so I had to tell her, like, you got to stop eating that way because you're driving your T3 into the ground. I did a whole episode about this. So I'm not going to get too into it because in the episode, I actually go through all the PubMed studies that have been done on low carb diets and reverse T3 and free T3 and how it affects those. So reverse T3 is a storage hormone. And when your body is sick, or you've got an infection of some sort, or you're in high amounts of stress, your body's super smart. And so it has this little reverse T3, this little storage hormone that T4 can convert to in order to maintain energy in the system, maintain the metabolism, lower it down in order to conserve energy. I said that wrong. So in order to conserve energy, is going to downregulate your free T3 and shuttle it into reverse T3 so that the body can heal. So you'll see people, there was one study that was done where people had infections, and they did a pre and post testing and have watched the reverse T3 go up when somebody was sick, especially when if they're over dieting, if they're calorie restricting, if they're going too low carb, which tends to then put them into a major caloric deficit a lot of the time, they see that this reverse T3 goes up and free T3 goes down. And there's actually quite a bit of research done on this. And so I link to all the PubMed articles and the journals in which these are published in that episode. So I can link to the episode so you can go check it out, Lesa. But it's safe to say you need to get that reverse T3 down. So putting in some good healthy carbs, you can still stick within that paleo sphere. Find out why you have the reverse T3. So if putting carbs back in and doing some reverse dieting doesn't decrease your reverse T3, then you can look at taking some pure T3 to help. But please, at the same time, you have got to try to figure out the root cause of why it is elevated. Because we can take this medication and it can help so that the reverse T3 comes down, but that doesn't solve why it was happening in the first place. I mean, your body's doing this for purpose. So you have to figure out, okay, why is that happening? Do you have heavy metals? Do you have mold? Do you have nutrient deficiency? Are you low in iodine, selenium, zinc? Is your cortisol too high? Is your cortisol too low? All of these things can affect that conversion rate between T4 to T3 and make it shuttle into reverse T3. And you will gain weight very quickly. And the answer is not to diet harder and exercise harder, because it will make it worse. So start babying yourself and your body, start feeding it good nutrient dense foods with proper amounts of calories. You don't have to go super high carb. This is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying moderate amounts of carbs. Just make sure your calories are up to a good amount, that you're not in a deficit, and so that your body can start healing itself. And then you could retest the reverse T3 and see if it's gone down. Okay. So start just doing kind of, one thing at a time. Switch the diet at first. Maybe the endocrinologist will give you some T3 medication, which will help to clear out that reverse T3. And then if it's not the diet, then you need to start going, okay, what else could it be? Could it be that I've got some mercury in my body? Could it be this? Could it be that? And you start to go through them. I've done a lot of episodes on reverse T3 stuff, so you can go back and listen to it. There was an advanced thyroid series that I did that you can go back and listen to. Check out Paul Robinson. He's got the only book out there on reverse T3, and he's got some great tips in there for that. All right, Gail. So I wanted to put this question in because I actually got it a number of times from a bunch of different people. So I'm going to say this one and it'll answer everybody's, which is Dr. Brownstein's interview. In Dr. Brownstein's interview, he mentioned a specific type of iodine supplement to take. I'm currently working with my physician on my iodine levels and was wondering what the supplement was called, what it included. If I remember correctly, he said you need iodine and iodide in it. So Gail and everybody else that said, I couldn't hear what he said. Dr. Brownstein recommends Lugol's iodine, and you're correct, it's got potassium iodide in it as well as iodine. And it's the combination, he said, that works so well. So I've got a link to where you can purchase Lugol's for a good price in Canada and the US, and it's in the show notes. So you can check that out. And it's definitely what I would say is the best. I just actually bought myself an iodine challenge test, which I also recommend people do. I had actually quite a few people after that episode message me saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to start taking iodine. This is, obviously we all need this or whatever, whatever people said. But there was a lot of you that were like, I'm going to start taking this because this sounds so amazing. As was I. I was like, after hearing him the first time on a podcast, not mine, a different one, I was like, I should be taking iodine. He's very convincing. And he's correct. I mean, he has literally tested thousands of his patients, and majority of them are coming back deficient. But it is, how deficient are you? And so I really think it's a good idea to test first. And you can also do this online and in the comforts of your own home. And I will link to where you can buy that test kit in the show notes as well. I haven't done mine yet. I'll be doing it in 2 weeks till next time I have to go to my naturopath, and because she's running it for me. And then I will post my results so that everybody can see. And it's also going to test me for fluoride and bromide. And I've got a hot tub that uses bromide pucks. So I'm a little bit nervous that my bromide might be a little bit too high, but according to Dr. Brownstein, I can just take iodine and that will help clear out the bromide. So there's that. And then now we've got Emma. I'm 50 years old and for the most part feel pretty good despite the fact that I'm in perimenopause. I'm struggling with perimenopause weight gain, gained 30 pounds since October. I'm finally getting my hair to grow back in the front and my dry skin is getting better. My nails are healthy again. I eat as clean as possible. At this time, I can't afford to go see a functional doctor. So I have been thinking of buying over-the-counter estrogen and progesterone bioidentical products. What would you recommend? Thank you for all the information you share with us. You're very welcome, Emma. Thanks for the question. So first of all, I'll just say, Emma, you should probably just join my On Track program so that you can get your labs looked at and get some coaching around this, because in my On Track group, we do a Q&A every 2 weeks, and it's just a really affordable way to get help. I will review your labs for you, make recommendations, give you links to products and hormones and everything else, or how to talk to your doctor about it. All of that is in there for literally a fraction of what it would cost to work with a functional doctor or myself. So check it out if you haven't. But to answer your question, yes, you can buy estrogen progesterone over the counter. I have a couple different brands in which I have stuck with because I use them myself and I know their quality and they're clean. So if you actually go into my women's wellness shop, I link to the products. I don't sell them myself. Some of them I do. Like I sell pregnenolone, I sell DHEA, I sell progesterone. What else do I have in there? I think that's it for hormones that I personally sell. But I link to my favorite progesterone cream. I link to my favorite Biest cream, which is a combination of estriol and estradiol. The issue with buying over the counter, estrogen specifically, is you can't get it in high enough amounts for what you'll need once you're in menopause. So if you're in perimenopause, so it'll be fine for now. But it's the most you can get is 1 milligram of estradiol per pump in these creams. And once you're in menopause, you definitely want to be on more than just 1 milligram a day. I find different women need different amounts, but anywhere from, I've seen some 4 milligrams. I've seen some that go way up to like 20, 30 milligrams. Some women will do physiologic restoration, which is really high amounts, and you're going to be cycling them. So there's many different amounts that you could be taking. So at that point, it would get, as far as cost effectiveness, it gets a little ridiculous because you're going to be going through these bottles really quickly. And so you'd be better off talking to your medical doctor and saying, you know what, you really want to try bioidentical estrogen cream or patch or suppository, whatever your choice of method is, and some progesterone, and have them prescribe it to you so that you can go up in amounts. Now, a lot of doctors are obviously, they're not trained in bioidentical hormones unless they've done, extended education past what they learned in med school. So if they are not familiar with bioidentical hormones, then you're going to have to advocate for yourself and say, look, like this, I've done my research. I want to try this and I want your help. I don't want to have to buy it over the counter. I always throw that one in there. I really don't want to have to buy it over the counter. I'd rather have you watch, monitor it, which you should. I mean, estrogen grows your uterine lining. And so you want somebody to be monitoring when you're using estrogen because you don't want that growth to get out of control. Now, most women would need to take quite a bit for that to happen, but some don't. So you want them to be watching your symptoms. Some women that are on higher, on estrogen therapy of any amount, really, they'll do ultrasounds of their uterine lining once a year to make sure that that growth is remaining where it should be. Now, taking progesterone obviously helps with counteracting that growth. So as long as you're taking progesterone, it's definitely then safer. So you can start with it over the counter, but I would definitely recommend eventually going through your family doctor or finding somebody that is affordable. There are some people that are affordable that aren't as expensive as a functional doctor, but do prescribe medication. There's lots of nurse practitioners that do that. I have found many of those throughout the States that are educated. They don't charge as much as a functional doctor would, and they can prescribe. So you could look for that, in your area. Okay. And then next we've got Sarah. Can a woman safely take compounded bioidentical progesterone pill? Is there a big difference between it versus cream? And then wondering how you feel about bioidentical progesterone in pill form. Is it as safe as cream? I think that was somebody else's question, but I had 2 questions about the progesterone, so I put them together. So Sarah, this is a hot topic. I want to do a whole podcast episode about this, but I wanted to just give you some pointers right off the bat, but I promise I will do a full episode about this. So what I've been finding with working with women and their hormones is majority of them are put on oral progesterone by their doctor when they want progesterone. That seems to be the go-to over progesterone cream. And there's a few reasons for this. One is there is some research that shows that bioidentical progesterone pill form does a better job at stopping that counteracting that uterine lining growth, the endometrial growth that happens from estrogen. So there's some that shows that taking it orally is better at counteracting and stopping that growth, doing what it should be doing. And it seems like all these doctors, that's the research they've seen. But there is some newer evidence that's showing that oral progesterone for some women doesn't protect the uterine lining. So once again, everyone is different and you're going to need different methods of delivery. Oral progesterone converts into metabolites called pregnanes. These metabolites, when they get too high, show that they can increase certain inflammatory markers in the breast, which could increase your risk of breast cancer. These metabolites, this inflammatory rise, doesn't seem to happen if the oral progesterone is under 100. So 100 or under. Anything over, you are increasing the risk of raising these pregnanes, which then can increase inflammation and increase your risk of breast cancer. Now, that said, there's also research of where the woman that developed the bioidentical progesterone cream, who used it in really high amounts for like a decade with patients and never had adverse reactions from it. So I tend to always lean on the side of caution as well. What does our body naturally do when we're fertile? Naturally, we don't put hormones through the liver before it hits our bloodstream. And this is one of the reasons. So estrogen, for instance, when estrogen first came out, it was Premarin, it was horse's urine, came from pregnant horse's urine, and was taken orally. And this is still around today. I just talked to someone yesterday that was taking it. But oral estrogen, birth control or Premarin, when taken orally, increases your risk of heart attack and stroke, because once it goes through the liver, once again, it creates these metabolites, not pregnanes, different metabolites with estrogen. But those metabolites can increase your risk of heart attack and stroke. So naturally, hormones aren't supposed to be going through your liver and your digestive system. Now, obviously, naturally, they're not supposed to be rubbed all over our body either. However, when you rub it on your inside of your forearm or up the back of your arm or inside your legs, in these soft tissues of the body, your blood comes through your arm, and as it's pumping, it picks it up in a pulsatile manner. Because of the way that your blood pumps through your veins, it picks up on this estrogen cream or progesterone cream and slowly delivers it into the bloodstream in a way that mimics how our body does it naturally. We naturally, like I said, it doesn't go through the liver and the digestive system. and creates these metabolites, whether it's progesterone or estrogen. So I'm always like, oh, I just want to lean over to what not. I mean, our bodies do all of this for purpose. Now, progesterone taken orally, when those metabolites that I was talking about really help with anxiety and insomnia. It reacts more so on these GABA receptors in our brain, which help us to relax and go to sleep. So it's often prescribed to women that are having insomnia as part of their perimenopause or menopause symptoms. And they're told to take it every day. So when you take 100 milligrams of oral progesterone, you're actually only getting about 25 milligrams once it gets through the liver and the digestive system. So that's not a lot. So my solution to all of this is to do a combination of both. Now, once again, you should be talking to your doctor about this. You can send them this podcast episode if you want, but I like doing if a woman's doing well on oral progesterone and she likes it for the sleep factor and the anti-anxiety factor, then just top it up with a little bit of progesterone cream. 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off is a good recommended starting dose, because naturally we only produce progesterone for half the month. So I really believe in following that cycle. We do estrogen daily, progesterone's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Some women in menopause will do 3 weeks on, 1 week off, and it works for them. Some feel they need to have it every day. I've talked to women that are like, I can't handle not taking my progesterone because then I don't sleep, I get anxiety, I get hot flashes. So if that's what's working for you and you're working with a practitioner, awesome, stick with it. If you're new to this and you're like, what do I do, pill or cream? You know what? Try a combo of both and see how that feels. Or try one and then try the other and see which one you like better. I took oral progesterone. I was put on it probably, oh my gosh, I want to say like 7 years ago, maybe more. And it was like instantaneous, the worst depression I've ever felt in my life, cried uncontrollably. It was terrible because I obviously do not need that. So for me, it's got to be cream. And I do the 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And I find that as long as I'm taking the estrogen, that everything stays happy and solid inside my system. So if you're just on progesterone, you have to you got to play around with it and see what you like. But to answer your question, Sarah, and whoever else asked the other question, there's pros and cons to both. Please find what's going to work for you. All right, Gina, I always find your podcast very interesting, and there was a single nugget which I would like to know more about. I would like to know more about how a vision test can determine toxicity levels. So Gina, I had to actually go look this up because I was like, I tell my clients, that I suspect have mold. I always tell them to go do this test, but I'm not exactly, I just know that mold somehow affects your vision, even though you don't see that yourself until you take this test. So I looked it up and it said visual contrast sensitivity testing measures the ability to see details at low contrast levels and is typically used as a non-specific test of neurological functions. A VCS test generally involves the presentation of a series of images of decreasing contrast to test the subject and the recording of contrast levels, where patterns, shapes, or objects can or cannot be identified. The results of the test can then be used as a screen for diagnosing the visual systems and neurological dysfunction. I know that's a lot. You're probably like, yeah, Karen, that doesn't help. The VCS test indicates how certain biotoxins, such as mold, create a neurotoxin affecting the brain and retinal artery blood flow. So that's in your eye, right? So it somehow affects the blood flow. This interferes with the ability to discriminate between white and gray contrast as seen in the test. According to Dr. Shoemaker, he's like the head of like the mold stuff, mold research. If the symptoms are present and the VCS test is positive, even in one eye, there is a 98.5% chance of having CIRS. This makes it one of the most accurate screening tests in medicine. Whew. So even if you don't understand any of that, it's still clearly very much worth doing. It's like $15 to do. So if you suspect mold or you've got chronic illness, not even if you suspect, if you've got chronic issues that don't seem to go away no matter what supplement you take or what diet you do, definitely head over and take the mold tests. Mine came back, you probably heard me say this before, but I did it, and mine came back that I had no mold, but that I was fighting a toxin, possibly heavy metals. And then so from there, I went and tested my heavy metals, and sure enough, I had crazy levels of lead and mercury. So it was pretty accurate. Okay, Lesa. Are there optimal numbers we should strive to hit for estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone when taking HRT, or a ratio between them so we know if they need adjusted to feel our best? Okay, great question. I actually put together a whole PDF printout sheet of what levels you want to be aiming for, what range you want to be aiming for as a fertile woman, a perimenopausal woman, and a woman on HRT. So that's going to be available actually to all of my members in the On Track group. But bottom line is, as I said earlier, hormones are really individual. If someone had looked at my estrogens last year, they would never have put me on estrogen. Never. Not my doctor anyways. I had a hormone doctor that had said, oh yeah, for sure, you need to be on it, because my FSH was going up. So for me, even though it was good levels, for me, it was too low. So it really, really, once you start taking those bioidenticals, like I said to Helen, once you start taking them, you really need to go a lot by symptoms rather than numbers. You definitely want, estrogen, like I said, we want it ideally over 100. Some women aim to have their FSH come down, the follicular stimulating hormone come down to under 10. And that's where they feel their best. Other women will go by their estrogen numbers. And as long as they're, 150, 200, that's where they feel their best. I've heard some hormone doctors say they want to just make sure they're over 60 with estradiol, but preferably higher. So you can see how it gets very tricky. Testosterone, I've once again researched many different opinions on testosterone for women, but I can definitely say that women, as they go into menopause, seem to do better when testosterone's closer to that 35 or 40. But if you're not in menopause, you can feel, some women feel just fine with having, between 25 and 40 seems to be okay as well. But that's kind of the range you're looking for is NGDL is the measurement, but nanograms per deciliter. So between 25 and 40 is a good aim. But once again, how does that feel? I had a woman in my membership group yesterday in the Q&A who was saying that her testosterone was super low. So they put her on testosterone shots. And she said it was a really, really low amount. And she just broke out in zits everywhere. She was getting like big boilers on her face and whiskers, and And no matter how far they dropped that dose, that's what happened. So that's a sign that she was going down actually what's called the 5-alpha reductase pathway, which is more androgenic. So you're going to get the oily skin, the zits, some women go bald. So just more masculine pathway. So there's the 5A and there's 5B. The beta pathway is always the more preferred pathway, is a little gentler. So if you're somebody that's metabolizing their testosterone down the 5-alpha reductase pathway, you're going to get zits. But if you're somebody that's going down the beta pathway, you might not. You might need to go up to 4 milligrams of testosterone a day or something like that. So you don't know until you try and you go, okay, I don't feel anything. Okay, well, let's increase a little bit. How does that feel? Working with your practitioner and finding your hormonal sweet spot is going to be key. But that's what you can aim for estrogen and testosterone. Progesterone's really, you got to go by symptoms, because progesterone doesn't show up very well in serum blood work, and it overshows in saliva. So you're better to go by symptoms and just making sure that you've got the right amount. A typical starting dose for progesterone cream in your fertile years, or if you're still getting a period, early perimenopause, typical starting dose tends to be around 25 milligrams. As you head into menopause, it can go anywhere from 50 to 200 milligrams. Of progesterone. I've seen women do really well on higher amounts, and then I've had some women that do excellent on the lower amounts. So progesterone, tricky one, but definitely more so by how you feel and how it's counteracting that estrogen. So making sure that you don't have any breakthrough bleeding, and that, anxiety's in check, you're sleeping well, all of these things. As long as you're not having any of those symptoms, and you feel good, you've got, a healthy sex drive, you've got good vaginal lubrication, you're not forgetting your words, you don't have foggy brain, your energy's good, your emotions are stable. I know you guys are all like, really? We can actually get rid of all of these things? And yes, trust me, you can. It is absolutely 100% possible for women to eradicate these symptoms. And like I said, always different. Each one of us is going to need a different amount. I've met a lot of women that do really, really well on physiologic restoration. Now, physiologic restoration, I'm going to have a doctor come in to talk about this on my podcast that's more familiar with it. But physiologic restoration is when you mimic the cycle amounts, the hormone amounts of a 25-year-old woman. And you cycle the hormones the same way as you did when you were fertile. And so you do take different amounts on each day. And these amounts go up really high for some women. We're talking, 40 milligrams a day of estradiol, and progesterone goes up to 250, I think, maybe 3. Can't remember all the numbers, but women will continue getting their period. So you're on enough hormones that you're actually growing that endometrial lining, and you're on enough progesterone to come in and slough that endometrial lining off and counteract it, and you get a period. So women will continue getting their period until they're 60, 70, however long they want to get it for. But that is where they feel their best. They tried low dose static dosing and it didn't work for them. It didn't get rid of their symptoms. And so that is the amount that they feel their best on. And there's a number of different practitioners that do physiologic restoration in both Canada and the United States. So if you're somebody that's been on static dosing and you've increased your dose and you're like, every time I increase my dose, I feel better, but not 100% still, then that's something that you might want to explore and find a physician that does physiologic restoration. Okay. I think I've got, here we go. One more. Hi, Karen. Thank you for taking questions for your Saturday podcast. I'm a 46-year-old who's really bothered by the uncertainty of when my period is coming. It seems I'm into my perimenopause stage, and my cycle could be 19 days 1 month and others 29. I recently had a record of 41 days. Is there anything we can do other than bioidentical hormones to help having more predictable and regular cycles? Thanks, Millie. Okay, so I asked Millie after that, I said, do you have an issue with taking bioidentical hormones? Or she's just like, no, I just want to know, like, is there something else I can do before jumping to that? So Millie, yes, there is. So there's definitely some herbals that will help your ovaries to basically wring out the last of those hormones in your ovaries. And if you're still getting somewhat of a period, then you have a better chance of those herbals working. So the best thing at this point, because you're starting to go long time, like 41 days without a period, that's telling us that the estrogen starting to drop. So you can do things like take phytoestrogens, and that will help. So phytoestrogens do have a weak action on estrogen receptors. So you can take that and do things like incorporate flax into your diet. You can do seed cycling. If you haven't heard of that, Google it. And it's taking certain seeds at certain times of the month to help your body to regulate the progesterone and estrogen. You can take Vitex for the progesterone. So you could do like phytoestrogens on a daily basis. Things like black cohosh, sage are all great phytoestrogens, flaxseed, sunflower. I think it's sunflower, sesame seed. I can't remember which one. I think it's sunflower is estrogenic. And then on the second half of the cycle, you would add in Vitex, and that helps your own body's production of progesterone. So only though, if you've still got the progesterone, like once your ovaries stop producing it, they stop producing it. There's not much you can do about that. You can't supplement your way back to having hormones again. When your ovaries start to atrophy, they just start to atrophy, and they just stop producing these hormones. Now, the adrenal system will pick up on production of the progesterone, but in small amounts. And so by making sure that your cortisol doesn't get too high and you're not highly stressed out, that can also help preserve some of that progesterone so that your adrenal system will make it. Because if it's making a whole bunch of cortisol all the time, it's not going to make that progesterone. Estrogen will start being made by your fat stores. This is why you'll gain weight when you go through perimenopause. It's going to start to make estrone, which is a more toxic estrogen, out of your fat cells so that your body can get some estrogen. You don't really want that to happen because estrone makes you fat. And it's the estrogen that's more linked to breast cancer. So that's why I'm a big believer in start replacing as soon as it starts going, so you save yourself from the weight gain. So I obviously, if you've been listening to me for a while, I'm for the replacing, but you can absolutely start with some supplements. So the maca is a good one. That can help with testosterone levels. It can help with DHEA, which is a precursor to testosterone and estrogen. So maca, black cohosh, sage, adrenal support, Vitex, those are all probably, and then eating, flaxseed every day, like a tablespoon or two of flaxseed every day is also going to help mimic estrogen in the body, and see what that does. Start there and see how, give it a couple months. If it's not helping, then okay, well, I guess my ovaries are just saying goodbye to producing these hormones. And maybe then you can talk to your physician about starting some replacement if that's what you so choose to do. All right, you guys, so that is it for the Q&A today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next week. If you have any questions, you can follow the link below, or you can private message me on Instagram or Messenger on Facebook. All right, guys, have a great day wherever you are.